This morning, I'd like to invite you to pause in the midst of all the questions, the risk assessment, the decisions that must be made, in the middle of all the increased anxiety that opening the state up again will bring, and all the coronavirus yada, yada, yada. I'd like to consider a different way to yada. In most Bible translations, our word acknowledge comes from a Hebrew word, yada, which means to know or recognize, to acknowledge. Sometimes during these irregular times, in our effort to encourage one another, we forget that to be relentlessly positive can actually be hurtful to those who are quietly struggling, weighed down by a grief over the losses. It's important for us to stop for a moment to acknowledge, to yada, the loss and the grief that is universally felt right now. Certainly, the quality and degree of loss will vary considerably among us, but the feelings are part of our current human condition. Why then do we have so much trouble acknowledging these harder feelings? Maybe we don't want to be seen as weak. Certainly we don't want to be the negative one, and often we don't want to burden friends or family with these feelings. And sometimes we are not even acknowledging them to ourselves in our own hearts and minds. This is why the Psalms are so precious. They give us a common language for our grief. The Psalms allow us to extend the sort of narrow range of emotion in which we typically live, and to experience and name those highs and lows of our lives. The psalmists are not carefully choosing their words to keep from sounding like drama queens. Oh no, they go all out in describing their situations, using words like calamity and disaster. They call out to God from the depths and cry aloud with weeping, wailing, and lament. And we are encouraged to step right into the drama and join them in this chorus of laments, to cry out to God with all our concerns and with all our hearts. God is a safe place to bring all our loss, griefs, worries, and pains in prayer. But there is a pattern in the Psalms we can't overlook, and I call it the prayer praise pattern. God knows, and the psalmist learned also, that to pour out our laments and to express and acknowledge our grief and to stay there does not acknowledge God's power and ability and presence in our situation. It fails to acknowledge, or yada, our faithful Father God. When we sit with God in the acknowledging, we allow Him to lift our cares, and we can sense His love and His strengthening presence. And then, again, we can go out, and this causes us to praise. It's sort of like going from the ah to the ah. I think Psalm 13 expresses this perfectly. The psalmist starts by saying, "How long, O Lord, how long? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have sorrow in my heart?" And the lament goes on until verse 5, where the psalmist says, "But," and this is a theologically big but, because the psalm shifts here. He says, "But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation." Perfect example of the prayer praise pattern. But if you are quietly bearing a sense of grief and loss in these unusual and irregular times, I encourage you to go to God and acknowledge, to yada with God. And I also invite you and encourage you to seek out people, friends, that are a safe place for you to acknowledge. And then to yada, yada, yada with those precious people in your lives. So blessings to all, and yada, yada, yada.